Voting Slav TV.
This past Monday, between 10,000 and 20,000 predominantly white farmers gathered in Johannesburg for the Black Monday March in protest against the murder of white farmers in South Africa. Thousands of people who were galvanized by a group called Genoeg Genoeg, or Enough is Enough, took their protest to the public while paying tribute to those who have been killed. Since the beginning of 2017, there have been at least 341 attacks on white farmers, with 70 of those attacks having been fatal. In the course of the past few years, the number of attacks on farmers and the number of fatalities in these attacks has grown exponentially, especially in rural areas where law enforcement is limited. These murders are often very brutal in nature and involve torching, strangulation, rape, and countless forms of torture that force the victims to watch many brutal acts being executed on their family members. Despite the massive number of people that showed up to the Black Monday March, the mainstream media remained relatively quiet on the event, with the BBC framing it as a protest of racial division and pro-apartheid sentiments when it was in fact one of unity against a very serious problem. Unfortunately, the voices of the many victims involved in these brutal crimes have been completely drowned out by a South African political agenda that has openly called for the removal of white farmers and their lands across the country. In March of 2017, President Jacob Zuma of South Africa called for the confiscation of white land without compensation after he called on Parliament to change South Africa's constitution to allow the expropriation of white land without compensation. On a separate occasion, Zuma had no issues expressing his hatred for the whites in South Africa, and even publicly sang, "Kill the Boer," referencing the Boers who were South Africa's original Dutch and Huguenot settlers. Julius Malema, the leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party and a political opponent to President Zuma, also shamelessly boasted about killing whites in a speech where he advised that there was no need to slaughter whites, at least for now.
We are not calling for the slaughtering of white people, at least for now.
Similar sentiments were also echoed by the president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, who made it very clear that he would not be prosecuting the men accused of murdering white farmers during the country's controversial reform program in the 2000s. Coupled with all these problems is the fact that South African authorities refused to release the statistics on farm attacks and farm murders to the public up until very recently. According to the statistics of the police and the civil rights group AfriForum, there were no less than 1,700 farm murders and 12,245 farm attacks from 1996 and 1997 to 2016 and 2017. Since then, the figures for farm attacks have increased for 3 consecutive years now, and since 2014 and 15, there has been an increase of 28.3%. To put things in perspective, the general figure for murder in South Africa is currently 34 per 100,000 of the population, but for farmers, it's approximately 130 per 100,000. Hence the emphasis on farm murders. The Western Cape, where the majority of these murders occur, is especially vulnerable because 15 of the 34 police stations where the police's rural safety strategy has not been implemented at all are located in the province. Unfortunately, many of the aforementioned statistics were completely suppressed and kept away from the public eye because authorities knew that farm attacks and farm murders were now becoming a daily occurrence all across the country. Many NGOs and politicians have also denounced these murders by attempting to discredit the statistics around them, all the while mocking the many political figures and civil rights groups who have pointed out that these murders are all part of a broader plan for ethnic cleansing and the gradual displacement and removal of whites.
When you look logically at where South Africa is going with all the anti-white legislation that we've got and the measures and so on, there seems to be a sense that whites are not welcome in the long term in South Africa, and they should find some other place in the world to go and live. A lot of them have gone to Australia and these places. And the European Union and many European countries have actually supported very radical movements in South Africa, like Mugabe's ZANU-PF. I mean, ZANU, he came here not so long ago where he said he didn't want to see white faces.
Farmers, who have always been the lifeblood of every nation, now find themselves having the most dangerous job in South Africa and have virtually no protection in a system that calls for their own demise. The global media has purposely remained muted on this issue because racism, hate, and violence towards whites simply doesn't fit their narrative at a time when black victimhood culture is being so greatly exploited. While innocent white South African farmers continue to fight against their brutal assailants in an environment of complete chaos and terror, only the spread of information such as this can help to bring attention to a massacre that has been kept in the shadows for far too long.